Nearly every Glide project starts with the basics: a collection showing data from one of your tables that you've styled in a certain way, and the ability optionally for you to let your users add and edit the data that's in that table. But very often we want to create sophisticated interfaces that are more complex than this, that allow us to do things that are much more specific to our workflow. And one of the tools that you'll need to be able to do this is the form action and the form container. So in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into forms, learning all the different fundamental things about them. We'll start with the default collection action, then the form action, then the form container, and then have a look at additional values, which are really powerful for speeding up people adding information to your tables. Let's dive in. In Glide, it's really easy to enable adding on a collection, and you've almost certainly done this before. Just add a collection, choose the source, and then toggle the add action on or off. Now users can submit new items to this inventory table. But often we want to create forms where the user may or may not see the row that they submit. For example, this is an admin dashboard that lets admins create new items in multiple different tables. This is a customer portal, and when customers browse items, they're looking at the data in this inventory table. But when they place an order on that item, a new row gets added to the orders table. And then finally, this is just a simple help desk. The user doesn't actually see any of the data on the screen that gets submitted, but when they do submit a ticket, this populates the support table, and admins can see this. All of these scenarios can be achieved with the form action or form container. So let's look at both of these now. The form action can be added to many different components like the button, title, image, and even collection components, which it's often added to by default. Let's create the admin dashboard that we just saw earlier. In this delivery app, we have 4 main tables for users, tasks, hubs, and trips. We'll create a new custom tab. A custom tab basically means that we can customize this tab however we want. The data source for the tab doesn't really matter so much because we can put whatever we want onto it. Let's add a button block and then change the first action to be the show form screen action. This action that we're adding here is exactly the action that's added by default on top of every collection. It's just that that action is adding to that same collection. What we're doing here is we're deliberately adding it to another component, and then we'll point that to wherever we want. The cool thing about having the action here and customizing the action itself is that we can also pick the style of the form screen that we'll show. So I'm going to choose this really nice slide-in one. Now at this point, we can't choose the destination for the form. We have to actually open the form screen to do this. Now we're going to make this form screen submit to the users table, so we'll add the title new user. When we click this button, our new form screen opens. In the top right, we see the destination for the form, and it's currently set to the tasks table. Let's change it to the users table. When we do this, the entry components in the form screen change to reflect the columns in that new table. Glide adds these components automatically based on whatever it finds in your table, but we can customize this screen however we want and prevent users from adding data to certain columns. So we can just delete these entry fields and people won't actually be able to add data to these columns, but they'll be able to add a new row missing out these columns. We can also mark a field as required and toggle this inside of each component. And if we add one or more of these, this will mean that someone can't submit the form until they fill out data in these fields. Now, if we submit an item, we'll see that row added in our table, and it will show up wherever we're displaying that data. Now the form action is really useful, but it creates a new screen. When you trigger that action, a new screen opens. You can change the style of it, but it still means that whatever is behind that screen is kind of not the primary information. Sometimes you might want to add information in a form inline, like you were on a website, on a contact form, for example. And this is where you'll need the form container. For example, in this customer portal, users can place an order on their home page or inside of an item, and both of these are using the form container. You're inline on a screen and you're able to submit a form without triggering a new screen. Let's say that on this screen, we also want to add the ability for people to submit general support tickets, again, without opening a new screen. We'll add a new form container and make sure that we've selected the container itself and then choose the destination for that form. As we change the destination, you can see that our default components update automatically. And our support tickets table has columns for date, user email, title, content, but it also has columns for our admins to update. Now, these are columns that we don't want people to be able to submit information to. We don't even want our users to know that these columns are here. So we'll make sure that we delete these fields from our form, and then the users won't be able to submit to them. It's also worth knowing that you can add components to form screens and form containers whenever you like. Here I'm just going to add a text entry component and then make sure that it's writing to the column that I want, the content column. And then if I close this window, I can reorder everything and retitle this so this form is now complete. So very often you're going to want to pass values on behalf of the user that they don't necessarily know about. For example, their email or the time of day or the item that that user is currently viewing. These are things that the user doesn't want to have to type out themselves, but is very useful to you as the project creator or to create extra functionality based on that submission. And these are additional columns and special values. Let's take a look at how they work. So here we're on an inventory item that any customer could order when they're viewing this screen. If we look in the form container settings, we can see a section called additional columns. Additional columns basically means the columns that the form is not currently adding to. Here we see the admin columns that we deleted earlier. If we delete a field that's currently in our form, it will now appear here. And we can add a custom value here if we want, but the power comes when you click inside of this menu. Here we have access to things like the date, the user email, data from the user profile, or the data from this screen that this form is within. And we can pass any of these values along with the form. Let's place the current date, time, special value in this date column, and then the user's email address value in the email column. Now when our users submit a form, these values will automatically be populated.